The silver knife trembled in my hand as I sliced through the prosciutto, paper-thin pieces curling onto the marble counter. Everything had to be perfect tonight. The first time meeting my son's fiancée deserved nothing less than immaculate presentation, even if my gut churned with an inexplicable dread. I'm Sutton, and after 22 years of being the only woman in Liam's life, I was about to share that privilege with someone else. The doorbell chimed. My knife slipped, nearly catching my finger. I wiped my hands, smoothed down my silk blouse, and crossed the hardwood floors that had witnessed every milestone of Liam's life. Now they'd carry the weight of this moment too. Mom. Liam's embrace was warm, familiar. He'd grown taller than me years ago, but I still saw traces of that little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. This is Chloe. She stepped forward, all polished edges and calculated grace. Designer dress, perfectly styled hair, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mrs. Harrison, I've heard so much about you. Please call me Sutton. I extended my hand, but she moved in for an embrace instead, her expensive perfume overwhelming my senses. Her grip was just a fraction too tight, lasting a moment too long. Your home is absolutely charming, Chloe said, her gaze sweeping across my carefully curated living room. So, cozy, though I imagine it must feel quite empty now that Liam's moved out. The slight pause before cozy didn't escape me. Neither did the way she kept her hand possessively on Liam's arm. Wine, I offered, leading them to the dining room where candles flickered against crystal glasses. It's a Bordeaux from 2015. Oh, I only drink natural wines now, Chloe said. The sulfites, you know. But don't worry about me. Liam jumped in. The table looks amazing, Mom. You didn't have to go through all this trouble. It's no trouble, I said, watching Chloe examine the place settings with the scrutiny of a health inspector. I wanted tonight to be special. Over appetizers, Chloe steered the conversation toward my career. Liam mentioned you used to be quite the powerhouse attorney. What made you step back into consulting? Mom chose to focus on raising me, Liam said proudly. How noble, Chloe smiled. Though it must have been difficult watching your colleagues advance while you simplified your life. The prosciutto turned to ash in my mouth. Actually, consulting offers more flexibility and, oh, that reminds me, Chloe cut in, turning to Liam. Remember that partner position I mentioned? They're fast-tracking my application. We might need to postpone our house hunting. That's wonderful, Liam beamed at her. Mum, Chloe's been killing it at her tech startup. Youngest team lead in company history. Impressive, I said, noting how she'd masterfully deflected attention from my career to hers. What exactly does your company do? Oh, it's quite complex. Corporate restructuring mainly. Actually, I'd love your insight on some legal matters, given your experience. She paused, fork hovering over her untouched salad. Have you ever handled cases involving intellectual property theft? The question landed like a stone in still water. Specific, targeted. My wineglass froze halfway to my lips. That's quite a specific area of interest, I said carefully. Just professional curiosity, Chloe shrugged, but her eyes held mine with unsettling intensity. You never know when such knowledge might come in handy. The evening continued like a choreographed dance, each step measured, each word weighted. But as I watched Chloe orchestrate every conversation, smoothly positioning herself between Liam and me, both physically and metaphorically, that initial dread crystallized into certainty. This wasn't just about meeting my son's fiancée. This was about something else entirely. The way she probed about my past cases, her calculated comments about my career choices, the subtle digs wrapped in sweet smiles. She was gathering ammunition. As they prepared to leave, Chloe embraced me again. Thank you for such an enlightening evening, Sutton. I can't wait to really get to know you. The threat beneath her words was clear as crystal. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Maya's garden always smelled like jasmine and secrets. I sat across from her on the weathered deck chairs, clutching my coffee mug like a lifeline while describing last night's dinner with Chloe. She kept asking about my old cases, Maya, specific ones, the kind nobody remembers unless they're digging. Could be professional interest, Maya said, but her frown betrayed her doubt. She works in tech, right? Corporate restructuring. I set down my mug, which makes her questions about intellectual property theft even more interesting. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. Chloe's planning a surprise visit to the wedding venue. She'd love your input. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the gravel driveway of Rosewood Manor. Chloe stood on the sweeping steps, designer sunglasses perched on her head, tapping away at her phone. No Liam in sight. "Oh, Sutton," she air-kissed my cheek. "I hope you don't mind. Liam got caught up at work. But I thought this would give us a chance to bond." The venue coordinator led us through the historic mansion. Chloe dominated the tour, speaking over the coordinator about her vision for each space. I noticed how she positioned herself between me and the coordinator, controlling the flow of information. The library would be perfect for the ceremony, the coordinator suggested. "Oh no," Chloe laughed. "That's much too small. We're thinking the grand ballroom. My guest list alone is 300 people." My stomach clenched. 300? Liam wanted a small wedding. Things change. Chloe's smile didn't waver. "Speaking of change, I've been meaning to ask about your consulting work. Any interesting cases lately?" "Nothing that would interest you. Don't sell yourself short. I heard you handled the Martinez tech merger last year. Fascinating case, especially the intellectual property disputes." The coordinator excused herself to take a call, leaving us alone in the ballroom. Chloe's heels clicked against the hardwood as she circled me. "You know what I find interesting," she said. "How certain sensitive documents from that case disappeared right before the ruling." My pulse quickened. "That's privileged information, is it? I suppose that's why it never made the papers." She examined her manicure. "Imagine the scandal if it had." "What do you want, Chloe?" "Want? I want us to be family, Sutton. I want you to trust that I know what's best for Liam, and I want you to step back from the wedding planning. Completely. And if I don't, then we'll have to have a very different conversation about trust, and documents, and statute of limitations." The coordinator returned, chattering about table arrangements. Chloe transformed instantly, all smiles and enthusiasm. That evening, I sat in my home office, staring at the Martinez case files. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Interesting day at Rosewood. We should talk." Ethan, Chloe's co-worker. Before I could respond, Liam called. "Mom, Chloe told me about the venue. Isn't it perfect?" "It's grand." I hesitated. "Liam, are you sure this is what you want? It seems very different from what we discussed." "I know it's not what we planned, but Chloe has this amazing vision, and her connections could really help my career. You understand, right?" I thought of the Martinez files, of Chloe's veiled threats, of my son's voice tinged with hope and uncertainty. "Of course I understand," I lied. "Whatever makes you happy." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and typed Chloe Bennett into the search bar. If she wanted to dig into my past, I could do some digging of my own. The search results loaded: employment history, social media profiles, news articles. But it was a small item from 3 years ago that caught my eye. A brief mention of another engagement, ended abruptly amid rumors of corporate espionage. My phone buzzed again. Ethan. "There's more to Chloe than anyone knows. Meet tomorrow." I typed back, "Name the place." The Martinez file sat heavy on my desk, a reminder of past mistakes and present threats. Chloe thought she had me cornered, but she'd made one crucial error. She'd threatened the wrong mother. The coffee shop buzzed with morning chatter, but Ethan's voice cut through it like a knife. She did the same thing at her last company, got engaged to the CEO's son, gained access to sensitive information, then disappeared when the merger went through. I studied him across the table, rumpled shirt, shadows under his eyes, fingers drumming nervously on his paper cup. Not exactly the picture of a reliable witness, but his details were too specific to ignore. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've watched her do it again. The engagement, the careful questions, the way she positions herself." He leaned forward. "And because I saw what happened to James Porter," the name hit me like a physical blow. James Porter, the CEO's son from Chloe's previous engagement. I'd seen the name in my research, but nothing more. "What happened to him?" Ethan's phone buzzed. His face went pale. "She's here, at the office. I have to go." He hurried out, leaving me with more questions than answers. I pulled out my phone, searching for James Porter. Nothing recent, but an archived article caught my eye. Tech heir steps down after security breach scandal. My phone rang. "Liam." "Mum, you'll never believe it. Chloe just got promoted to Director of Operations. We're celebrating tonight at Laurent's. You'll come, right?" The same restaurant where I'd celebrated making partner 15 years ago. Of course she'd choose that. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, already pulling up Laurent's seating chart from my old client files. That evening, Chloe held court at the best table in the house, the one with sightlines to every entrance. She wore cream silk, but her smile was all teeth. "Sutton, I'm so glad you could make it." She gestured to the man beside her. "This is Marcus Chen, our new investor. He was just telling me about his daughter's wedding in Bali." I recognized the name from my Martinez case files, the ones Chloe had threatened me with. "How lovely," I said, watching her hand rest possessively on Liam's arm. "Though I thought you wanted a small ceremony." "Oh, that was before," Liam said. "But with Chloe's promotion, we thought why not dream bigger?" Chloe finished. "Actually, Marcus's company is looking for legal consultation. I mentioned your expertise." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Take the job, become complicit, refuse, risk Liam's future. "I'm quite selective about my clients these days." "Mom," Liam frowned, "this could be huge for both of us." My phone vibrated, an email from an anonymous account. "James Porter, Meadowbrook Recovery Center." "Excuse me," I said, standing. "I need to make a call." In the restaurant's elegant bathroom, I read the full email: medical records, police reports, psychiatric evaluations. James Porter had suffered a complete breakdown after the merger scandal. His father's company had collapsed, their family fortune decimated. The bathroom door opened. "Chloe." "Everything all right? You seemed distracted." "Just work." I met her eyes in the mirror. "Tell me, do you still keep in touch with James Porter?" The slight widening of her eyes was all I needed. "That's ancient history," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Though speaking of history, how is the Martinez case documentation? All properly archived? You know what's interesting about archives?" I turned to face her. They never really disappear. They just wait for the right moment. "Careful, Sutton." Her mask slipped for just a second. "Some moments can't be taken back." She left, her heels clicking against marble. Through the door, I heard Liam's laugh, bright and trusting. My phone buzzed again. Another email. "Meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m., Meadowbrook Recovery Center." JP. I looked in the mirror, seeing not just my reflection, but 22 years of protecting Liam, of teaching him to ride a bike, to stand up to bullies, to trust his instincts. I'd fought for him since the day he was born. I wasn't about to stop now. Returning to the table, I watched Chloe charm Marcus Chen, her hand still on Liam's arm. She'd orchestrated everything perfectly, the promotion, the investor, the trap. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd threatened my son, and she was about to learn why even the most brilliant predators fear a mother's rage. Meadowbrook Recovery Center loomed against the autumn sky, all red brick and barred windows. James Porter sat across from me in the visitor's room, his expensive sweater hanging loose on his frame, hands trembling as he stirred his untouched tea. "She'll destroy him," James said. just like she destroyed me. And the worst part, he'll thank her for it. A nurse passed by, checking on us through the reinforced glass. James flinched at the movement. "Tell me about the merger," I said. "There was no merger. That was the point. She got access to everything. Security protocols, trade secrets, client lists. By the time anyone realized what was happening," he pressed his fingers to his temples, "my father lost everything. 40 years of building our company, gone in 6 months. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. 'Mom, need your help. Chloe's arranged a meeting with Marcus Chen. Says you're joining the legal team.' James noticed my expression. 'Let me guess. She's already positioning herself.' 'What do you mean?' 'The legal team was how she started with us. Said she needed to understand the company structure. Next thing I knew, she had access to everything.' He leaned forward. 'Has she asked about your old cases yet?' 'The Martinez files.' My hands went cold. 'You need to understand something,' James continued. 'She doesn't just take information. She makes sure you're complicit. By the time you realize what's happening, you're already trapped.' Another text from Maya. 'Emergency. Ethan's been in an accident. Hospital says it wasn't an accident.' The room suddenly felt too small. I stood, but James grabbed my wrist. 'Wait, there's something else. Something about her background.' The door opened. A nurse entered. 'Mr. Porter, time for your medication.' 'No, please, I need to tell her.' But they were already leading him away, his last words lost in the institutional quiet. At the hospital, I found Ethan in intensive care. 'Car brake lines,' Maya whispered. 'Police are investigating.' My phone rang. Chloe. 'Sutton, I just heard about poor Ethan. Such a tragedy. You know, he's been under so much stress lately. Apparently, he's been accessing confidential company files after hours.' The threat was clear as crystal. 'What do you want?' 'Just what we discussed. The Martinez documentation, your legal expertise for Marcus's company, and—' a pause. 'A mother's blessing for her son's happiness.' Through the hospital window, I watched Ethan's monitors beep steadily. He'd tried to warn me, and now— 'The meeting's tomorrow at 10, Chloe continued. 'I've already told Liam you'll be there. He's so excited about us all working together.' After hanging up, I sat in the hospital corridor, my hands shaking as I opened my laptop. The Martinez files stared back at me. Evidence of corporate theft, manipulated depositions, a case that could have ruined lives if the truth had come out. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. 'Grace Harrison trying to reach you. Urgent family matter.' 'Grace, my mother. 20 years of silence, and she chooses now.' A text from Liam appeared. 'Mom, you're coming tomorrow, right? This means everything to me.' I closed my eyes, seeing James Porter's trembling hands, Ethan's still form, the Martinez files that could destroy everything I'd built. Chloe had orchestrated it perfectly, each piece falling into place, each person exactly where she needed them. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She thought she was dealing with a lawyer, a consultant, a woman bound by professional ethics and maternal guilt. She forgot she was dealing with a mother who'd spent 22 years protecting her child. I opened my phone and dialed the unknown number. 'Hello, Grace, we need to talk.' Sometimes, to save someone you love, you have to be willing to burn everything else to the ground. I looked at Ethan's hospital room one last time, then walked out into the gathering dark. Tomorrow, I'd sit in that meeting. I'd smile and nod and play my part. And then I'd show Chloe exactly what happens when you back a mother into a corner. Because there are two types of revenge in this world, the kind that destroys you and the kind that sets you free. I was done being destroyed. Grace's house hadn't changed in 20 years. Same faded curtains, same porcelain cats, same heavy silence that had driven me away. She set down her teacup, hand steady despite her age. 'I should have warned you about Chloe Bennett,' she said, 'or whatever name she's using now.' My cup froze halfway to my lips. 'What do you mean? 3 years ago, she was Charlotte Brooks. Before that, Claire Blackwood.' Grace pulled out a manila envelope. She's been running this scheme since she was 19. Different names, different cities, same pattern. Inside were newspaper clippings, police reports, photographs, young women with Chloe's face but different hair, different clothes, different lives. Each story ended the same way: destroyed companies, ruined families, missing documents. My phone buzzed. Ethan, finally conscious. She knows I talk to you, not safe. Delete everything. How did you get all this? I asked Grace. Because 5 years ago she was Catherine Barnes, and she almost destroyed your father's company. Grace's voice cracked. That's why he... The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Chloe's sleek car in the driveway. Back door, Grace whispered, shoving the envelope into my hands. I'll stall her. I slipped out just as Chloe's voice filled the house, all warmth and charm. Mrs. Harrison, what a lovely surprise. Liam mentioned you and Sutton might reconnect before the wedding. In my car, hands shaking, I spread out the evidence. Each article revealed another piece. Corporate espionage, identity theft, strategic marriages. But it was the last photo that stopped my heart. Chloe with my father, taken months before his suicide. My phone lit up. Liam. Mom, where are you? Chloe says you missed the meeting with Marcus Chen. Everything okay? Before I could respond, another text arrived. Chloe. Interesting chat with your mother. Shame about your father's gambling debts. Or was it embezzlement? Records can be so... confusing. The steering wheel felt cold under my fingers. Through Grace's window, I watched Chloe embrace her, playing the perfect future granddaughter-in-law. But her eyes scanned the room, hunting. My phone buzzed again. Maya. Police called. Ethan's gone. Left against medical advice. No one knows where. Then Chloe. The Martinez files by midnight, or Liam learns everything about Grandpa's accident. Your choice. The envelope felt heavy in my lap. 20 years of running from my father's disgrace, of building a new life, of protecting Liam from our family's shadows. Now, Chloe held all the threads, pulling them tight, but she'd made a mistake. She thought she was blackmailing a daughter ashamed of her father's sins. She didn't know she was threatening a mother protecting her son. I started the car just as Chloe emerged from Grace's house. Our eyes met across the driveway. She smiled, raised her hand in a wave that felt like a sentence. My phone lit up one last time. An unknown number. Storage Unit 23 Central Avenue. Password, redemption, come alone. JP, James Porter. Even from his hospital bed, he was still fighting. I pulled away from Grace's house, watching Chloe's figure shrink in my rearview mirror. She thought she had won, thought she held all the cards. But I had something she didn't. A mother's desperate love, and nothing left to lose. The storage facility waited ahead, its rows of metal doors holding who knew what secrets. Unit 23 stood at the end of a dark row, its padlock gleaming like a promise, or a threat. I reached for the lock, remembering Liam's smile, my father's shame, Chloe's perfect mask. The password felt like ashes in my mouth. Redemption. Sometimes, to save someone you love, you have to be willing to face the darkest parts of yourself. The lock clicked open. The rehearsal dinner sparkled with false promises. Crystal glasses caught the light, casting prisms across white tablecloths, while Chloe worked the room like a conductor leading her orchestra. Every laugh, every toast, every casual touch on Liam's arm, a perfectly choreographed performance. I clutched James Porter's USB drive in my pocket, its edges digging into my palm. One file upload, one moment of truth, and everything would shatter. Mum, Liam appeared beside me, happiness radiating from his face. Thank you for being here. I know things have been tense, but seeing you and Chloe finally getting along. My throat closed. The evidence felt like lead in my pocket. Bank statements, falsified documents, proof of Chloe's previous identities. Everything needed to save him. Everything needed to break his heart. Speech time. Chloe clinked her glass, drawing all eyes. I want to thank everyone for coming, especially my future mother-in-law, Sutton. Despite our rough start, she's shown me what true family means. Our eyes met across the room. Her smile never wavered, but her message was clear. Check and mate. My phone buzzed. Maya. Ethan found dead in his apartment, police calling it suicide. The room spun. Chloe raised her glass higher. To family, to trust, to new beginnings. To new beginnings, the crowd echoed. I stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. Heads turned. Liam frowned. Mom? I need some air. The balcony door clicked behind me, muffling the celebration. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, downloading the files from Porter's drive. The door opened. Chloe's perfume reached me before her voice did. Beautiful night for ruining lives, isn't it? I turned. Her perfect mask had slipped, revealing something cold and familiar underneath. My father's eyes before the end. I know what you did to Ethan, I said. Tragic, wasn't it? Depression's such a terrible thing. She moved closer. Just like your father's gambling problem. Amazing how history repeats itself. Stay away from my son. Your son? She laughed softly. Liam's already mine, and after tonight's announcement about the merger with Marcus Chen's company, his future will be too. Unless what? Delete the files, Sutton. All of them. Walk away. Let your son be happy. My finger hovered over the upload button. One press and everything would end. The door opened again. Liam stepped out, champagne in hand. Everything okay out here? Perfect, darling, Chloe purred. Your mother was just giving me some marriage advice. He beamed at us both, this beautiful boy I'd raised alone, who still saw the world in simple truths, who still believed in happy endings. Actually, Chloe continued, why don't you share our news, Liam? Mom, he grabbed my hands, eyes shining. Marcus offered me a position running the new merger division. Chloe helped arrange everything. We're moving to London next month. The phone slipped from my fingers, shattering on the balcony floor. With it went Porter's evidence, my last chance at exposure. Isn't it wonderful? Chloe wrapped her arm around Liam's waist. A fresh start, far from old complications. I looked at my son, really looked at him, saw his joy, his trust, his complete faith in the woman beside him, saw how thoroughly she'd won. Mum, say something. The words stuck in my throat, because in that moment, I finally understood. This wasn't about saving Liam anymore. This was about choosing between destroying his happiness or watching him walk into a trap I couldn't prevent. Congratulations, I whispered. Chloe's victory smile flashed in the darkness. To family, she raised her glass. My son pulled me into a hug, while over his shoulder, Chloe mouthed two final words, game over. And it was. Because sometimes protecting someone means letting them go, even when you know they're walking straight into the arms of the enemy, even when it breaks everything you are. The wedding venue's grand hall echoed with last-minute preparations when Grace arrived, clutching a worn leather portfolio. Her hands trembled, but her voice carried across the space. Catherine Barnes, she called out. Chloe froze at the altar, where she'd been directing flower arrangements. The name hit like a thunderclap in the quiet room. I'm sorry. Chloe's smile remained perfect, but her knuckles whitened around the roses she held. Or was it Claire Blackwood? Charlotte Brooks? Grace moved closer, each step deliberate. You've had so many names, I lose track. Liam appeared from the side room. What's going on? Nothing, darling. Chloe reached for him, but Grace opened the portfolio. Your father didn't gamble away our company, Sutton. Grace's voice cracked. She did. 5 years ago, when she was Catherine Barnes, engaged to Thomas Mitchell. I stepped out from behind the altar, James Porter's USB drive now connected to the venue's display system. The screens flickered to life, showing document after document, bank statements, identity changes, police reports. Mum? Liam's confusion turned to concern. What is this? Ask her, I said softly. Ask her about Ethan. Chloe's mask slipped for just a moment. Liam, they're trying to ruin our happiness. Your mother can't stand seeing you move on. And your grandmother lost everything, Grace continued. Just like James Porter's family. Just like Thomas Mitchell's. Just like every family you've destroyed. The doors burst open. Dylan rushed in, holding his phone. Liam, you need to see this. The merger documents, they're not what we thought. The company's being stripped for assets. Everyone's losing their jobs. Chloe's laugh turned sharp. You don't understand business, Dylan. Sometimes sacrifices, like Ethan. I stepped closer. Was he a necessary sacrifice? Ethan killed himself, she snapped, then caught herself. But it was too late. How did you know that? Liam asked quietly. His death wasn't announced as suicide. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Show him, Grace whispered. I pressed play. Security footage filled the screens. Chloe entering Ethan's building the night he died, leaving hours later with his laptop. He was unstable, Chloe's voice hardened. He would have ruined everything. Just like your father, Sutton. Just like everyone who stands in my way. My father, I said, was protecting me from you. And now I'm protecting my son. Protecting him? She laughed. Look around, Sutton. Look what you've done. You've destroyed his happiness, his career, his future. Some mother you are. No, Liam's voice cut through her words. You did that. When you lied, when you killed Ethan, when you tried to turn me against my own mother, everything I did was for us. Chloe reached for him, desperation cracking her perfect veneer. We can still have it all. London, the merger. The merger's fake, Dylan interrupted. The documents just leaked. It's all been a scam from the start. Chloe's eyes darted between us, calculating escape routes. But Grace stood by one door, Dylan by the other. And on the screens above, her past played out in damning detail. It's over, I said quietly. Over? Her laugh turned hysterical. You think this is over? Ask your mother what really happened the night your father died, Sutton. Ask her who really... I know what happened, Grace stepped forward. Because I was there, and I have proof. Chloe's composure shattered completely. She lunged for her bag, but Liam got there first, pulling out a gun. Insurance, she said wildly. Just insurance. For what? Liam's voice broke. For killing my grandfather, for planning to kill my mother. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Chloe's face contorted into something unrecognizable. No longer the perfect fiancée, but something raw and desperate. You're all the same, she spat. Weak, sentimental, thinking love conquers all. Love is a weapon, and I wielded it perfectly. No, I said, watching my son's heart break and heal in the same moment. Love is what brought you down. A mother's love. The one weapon you never understood. The police burst in as Chloe made her final desperate move. But in the end, it wasn't the evidence that destroyed her. It was the truth she never grasped. That sometimes the strongest vengeance isn't in destruction, it's in protection. The demolition crew arrived at dawn. I watched from my porch as they dismantled the gazebo where Liam had proposed to Chloe, each crack of splintering wood echoing like thunder. Maya appeared beside me, coffee in hand. You sure about this renovation? Through the window, I could see Grace in my kitchen, sorting through old photographs. She'd found one of my father earlier, his smile untouched by what was to come. Some structures can't be fixed, I said. You have to tear them down completely. The newspaper on my lap carried Chloe's sentencing on the front page. 5 to 10 years for corporate fraud, with additional charges pending for Ethan's death. Her mugshot showed a stranger, no makeup, no mask, just hollow eyes and bitter truth. Mum? Liam stood in the doorway, boxes in his arms. Where should I put Dad's old files? The study, Grace called out. We're organizing everything properly this time. Everything. Including the truth about my father's death, which Grace had finally shared. How he'd discovered Chloe's true identity. How he'd tried to warn me. How his accident hadn't been an accident at all. The demolition crew's machinery growled louder, and I watched another piece of my old life crumble. The detective called. Maya said quietly. They found Ethan's last video message. He recorded everything. I don't want to know. The words surprised me even as I said them. Some truths don't heal anything. Inside, Liam and Grace worked together, rebuilding our family's story one document at a time. Through the window, I saw him laugh at something she said, a sound I'd almost forgotten. Dylan's car pulled up, and he hurried over with a stack of papers. The merger's officially dead. The board voted this morning. Everyone keeps their jobs. And Marcus Chen? Singing like a bird to reduce his sentence. Dylan grinned. Turns out he's got quite a lot to say about Chloe's previous identities. The last wall of the gazebo fell, revealing the garden beyond. My garden. Not the pristine showcase Chloe had demanded, but the wild, honest space my father had loved. They're bringing James Porter home next week, Maya mentioned. His doctors say the breakthrough probably saved his life. A butterfly landed on the railing, its wings catching the morning light. For a moment, it looked like the one from my father's favorite photograph. The one where I'm 3 years old, chasing butterflies while he watched, proud and protective. You never told Liam everything, Maya said softly, about what Chloe planned for after the wedding. He doesn't need to know. I watched the butterfly take flight. Some burdens are meant for mothers alone. Grace appeared with fresh coffee, her hands steadier than they'd been in years. The contractors hear about the new plans. I stood, feeling the weight of the past fall away with each step toward the future. Through the dust of demolition, I could see the foundation, strong, unchanged, waiting for something new to rise. "Mom," Liam called from inside. "I found something weird in Dad's old files. Something about a safety deposit box." I exchanged glances with Grace. Some secrets weren't meant for today. Some truths would wait for their own time, their own story. "Coming," I called back, but paused at the door. The butterfly had returned, landing now on the space where the gazebo had stood. Maya touched my arm. "You okay?" I thought of Chloe in her cell, of Ethan's final warning, of my father's sacrifice, of all the ways love could turn to poison, and poison to protection. "I'm ready," I said, and stepped inside to help my son rebuild our home. Because that's what mothers do. We protect, we survive, we rebuild. And sometimes, in the ruins of what was lost, we find something stronger than revenge, the truth of who we really are. The butterfly took flight one last time, disappearing into the morning light, leaving only shadows and possibilities behind.
Are you trying to ruin our wedding? I didn't mean to. I just wanted to say that you're spending too much money. Lisa, I understand that you are poor, but Sean is going to be the next president, right? We don't need to worry about money. Even if he is going to be the next president, this is too much. That's not true. When I asked him, "Don't you want to see your mother happy?" Sean would listen to anything I said. What? Sean loves you, doesn't he? When I said it was for you, he generously provided the money. The words hit me like a knife. I suddenly looked at the face of the bride, and she was smirking at me. You exploited the feelings of my son who cared about me. Anger was bubbling up inside me. To this, the bride responded with shocking words. So what? If you're going to complain anymore, can you please leave? We don't need a low-educated poor mother. Please don't involve yourself with us ever again. Her words, steeped in a sense of superiority, rapidly amplified my anger. I would never forgive this. The time she could feel victorious was only temporary. Glaring at the back of Lisa, who was walking away, still looking down on me, I made a firm resolution and attended the reception. My name is Megan. My husband passed away early, and now I live with my son Sean. Since my family was poor, I started working as soon as I graduated from junior high school. Later, I met my husband who had started a company, and we got married. Decades later, when his business stabilized and we were financially comfortable, my frugality never faded, and I still live a life of saving. Neither my husband nor Sean ever spoke ill of my frugality. On the contrary, they accepted it and joined me in being economical. My son, who has a generous personality, has accepted my frugal nature without complaint even now as a working adult. After my husband's death, the company was taken over by my brother-in-law Kevin, who is now the president. Sean works there and is a candidate for the next president. Despite such talk, my son continues to live as usual without boasting. Sean, whom I raised alone after my husband's death, is my pride and joy. Sometimes I worry that he cares too much about me and pushes himself too hard. But that caring nature is also what I'm proud of. Since he started working, his independence seems to have grown. And he has become a very reliable man recently. So, when he said, "I have a girlfriend," I felt a bit lonely, but I genuinely wanted to bless them. She's a girl introduced to me by a friend, but she's really nice. I smiled at the happy Sean. I want to start a family soon, to reassure you, Mom. So, I want to marry her. Oh, thank you. But haven't you been dating her for only a short time? Don't rush into marriage because you're worried about me. It's your life, so make your own decisions without worrying about me. It was delightful that he cared about me. But I didn't want him to choose his lifelong partner just to reassure his mother. However, the fact that he had a girlfriend, that he seemed very happy, and above all, that he cared so much about me, warmed my heart. I was blessed to have such a son who loved me. That's what I thought. Half a year after hearing from Sean that he had a girlfriend, the two were seriously considering marriage, and he said she would come to greet me. Although I had heard about Lisa from my son several times before, it was the first time to meet her. "Megan, is it true that you are a junior high graduate? And yet, you raised a fine son like Sean?" After introducing ourselves and chatting a bit, it was when Sean left the table. Lisa gave me a provocative look. Well, yes, Sean has really grown up well. I barely managed to respond, but I couldn't help feeling uncomfortable with her words. Although her words praised Sean, they seemed to mock me as well. Fine? You don't humble yourself at all, do you? Normally, people are modest. Oh, maybe you don't know this kind of common sense because you're a junior high graduate? What? Oh, sorry. I was just curious. It's really amazing. I definitely couldn't raise a son as a single mother. Although she said that, the corners of her mouth were slightly twisted in a smirk. What were you talking about? When Sean returned and asked this, Lisa responded without hesitation. We were talking about how amazing it is that your mother raised such a wonderful Sean. I really respect you, Megan, she said, turning a smile towards me. But I could feel the thorns in her words and couldn't shake off a feeling of discomfort. Right. Sean is going to be the next president, right? The conversation shifted to the future of the two, inevitably leading to talks about Sean's upcoming promotion. She looked excited about the prospect of Sean becoming the next president. In contrast, my son responded calmly. It's just because my uncle is the president that people say that. I'm still inexperienced and need to study and grow more. It's the company my father left behind, so I can't take it lightly and let it decline. But you will become the president eventually, right? Lisa asked, hurriedly. I'll do my best to make it happen. Sean said this with a smile, but she seemed a bit dissatisfied. Before we talk about becoming president, you need to get promoted first. The jobs assigned to you depend on your position, and you need to be aware of those responsibilities. When I advised this, my son nodded strongly. Lisa regained the sparkle in her eyes at this. When you get promoted, your salary will increase, right? Since you're being called the next president, I guess your income will keep getting better, huh? Her eyes lit up at the mention of a next president and salary. The discomfort I felt about her remained even after she left. Tell me, Sean, isn't Lisa just marrying you for your money? She seemed too interested in your salary and the talk of you becoming the next president. I couldn't help but ask my son. It's his life, even if we are family. I shouldn't have interfered, but I couldn't help speaking out, considering his happiness. However, Sean denied it. I don't think that's the case. Lisa is concerned about money because she plans to manage our finances after we get married. Money is also important in marriage. I see. So, you two have discussed it properly. Yes. Lisa said she would manage our finances when we get married. She's a very responsible woman, so it'll be fine. Well, if you say so. Mom, I'm 28 years old, okay? I'm an adult, so please don't worry like that. My son's smile swept away my worries. Seeing his expression, I realized something. Perhaps I was just feeling a sort of jealousy towards Lisa. Was that what it felt like to be the mother of a son who was getting married? I found myself strangely convinced by that thought. However, I would later realize that such thoughts were mistaken. A year after Lisa's greeting, they have a wedding today. I know nothing about the details of the wedding. Lisa told me not to interfere too much. Surely, the wedding is a significant event for the two of them and their future married life. I decided to silently watch over them, eagerly awaiting this day. However, when I arrived at the venue, I was stunned and stood frozen. The rented venue was decorated extravagantly, beyond what is usual for ordinary people. In the waiting room, there was a guess the color quiz for guests to guess the color of the wedding dress Lisa would change into during the ceremony. I've seen such productions before, but there was a distinct difference this time. There were 2 changes of clothes and guests were asked to choose 2 colors. The menu listed luxurious ingredients abundantly used in the dishes. Even the entertainment included a professional magician. I had attended many weddings before, but I had never experienced one as lavish and clearly expensive as this. I had not anticipated experiencing this at my son's wedding. This is too much. Disturbed and anxious about the wedding's extravagance, I thought I must talk to Sean. With that in mind, I headed to the bridal couple's room. There, I saw my brother-in-law Kevin and Lisa. Lisa was humbly and politely responding to the blessings from him. Thank you very much. Please continue to support Sean. I will do my best to support him too. I'm counting on you too. Sean has my expectations. Yes, I'll do my best. Lisa said this and responded politely. Even after finishing speaking, her smile remained, but as soon as she saw me, her expression turned into one of disdain. Feeling a bad premonition, I rushed to Lisa and asked about the situation. Lisa, it's been a while. You told me not to interfere too much, so I've been silent until now. But isn't this spending way too much? One dress change is enough. The wedding should be more modest. Despite my fluster, she looked calm and unapologetic as she responded. What can I say? It's already decided. It's troubling to hear this now. I was speechless, and Lisa looked at me with the same provocative eyes as when we first met. Are you trying to ruin our wedding? I didn't mean to. I just want to say that you're spending too much money. I understand that you are poor, but Sean is going to be the next president, right? We don't need to worry about money. Even if he is going to be the next president, this is too much. That's not true. When I asked him, "Don't you want to see your mother happy?" Sean would listen to anything I said. What? Sean loves you, doesn't he? When I said it was for you, he generously provided the money. The words hit me like a knife. I suddenly looked at the face of the bride, and she was smirking at me. You exploited the feelings of my son who cared about me. Anger was bubbling up inside me. To this, the bride responded with shocking words. So what? If you're going to complain anymore, can you please leave? We don't need a low-educated poor mother. Please don't involve yourself with us ever again. Her words, steeped in a sense of superiority, rapidly amplified my anger. I would never forgive this. The time she could feel victorious was only temporary. Glaring at the back of Lisa, who was walking away, still looking down on me, I made a firm resolution and attended the reception. Now, please welcome Megan, the groom's mother. After being invited to the microphone by the host, I prepared to give my speech. I had discussed the speech with Sean beforehand, but it seemed he had kept it a secret from Lisa. The course of events was different from what Lisa had planned, and there I was. Still not having left after being told to go, now about to give a speech. Though silent, she was clearly emitting a displeased aura. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Sean and I have supported each other all our lives. As I began my speech, I shared my feelings for my son. After recounting some old episodes, I continued. However, it seems that today I must let go of my son. Therefore, I am firing him. What? A murmur ran through the venue. My brother-in-law Kevin was also surprised. And the company's attendees showed confused expressions. The murmur in the room did not subside. The first to speak up was Lisa. Fired. What are you talking about? You're not even part of the company, so you can't make him quit. Even if you are his mother, that's not acceptable. What are you talking about? I said I'm firing Sean. You told me, we don't need a low-educated poor mother, so never involve yourself again. That's. Besides, it seems you're only after my son's money. I can't trust a son who would choose someone like you. That's why he's fired. The murmurs in the venue grew louder. Lisa's face turned red with embarrassment as her harsh words toward me were exposed. Sean was glaring sharply at her. What do you mean, we don't need a low-educated poor mother? Did you say that to Mom? And about being after the money. It doesn't matter, right? We're going to live our lives together from now on. So we don't need a mother who has no education or money. Besides, even if she said that, there's no way she can actually fire you. Mom is the chairperson of my company. What? Lisa's face, which had been red, quickly turned pale upon hearing my son's words. She asked, obviously flustered. But, you said she's a junior high graduate. A person like that being a chairperson. There's no such thing. That's the case. The company was founded by my father. Mom has been involved since the very beginning. Now, she understands the company more than anyone and holds the actual management rights. Why didn't you tell me such an important thing earlier? If you had told me sooner, this wouldn't have happened. Instead of apologizing, Lisa started blaming my son. But Sean looked at her with disdain. I was going to tell you the details of the company gradually. But now, that's unnecessary. Since the marriage is off, there's no need to tell you anymore. What do you mean? The marriage is off. Isn't it obvious? I can't marry someone who looks down on my mother and is only after money. The wedding is off. Sean's voice carried an undeniable authority. Lisa, realizing this was serious, suddenly tried to appeal to me. Megan. I didn't know you were the chairperson and I was terribly rude. I won't look down on you, who is the chairperson, anymore. Please forgive me. Lisa said this, apologizing, but of course, I had no intention of forgiving her. That's impossible. Because if I weren't the chairperson, you would still look down on me, right? I cannot be family with someone who cannot respect others and loves to waste money. Goodbye. With that, I started to leave the venue. Following me, Kevin stood up, and other attendees began to prepare to leave as well. Wait, please. Don't go, everyone. Lisa cried out, but no one even gave her a sympathetic look. Rather, my relatives said, it's good that Sean didn't marry such a person. And Lisa's relatives looked utterly dismayed. Lisa's friends also began preparing to leave quickly, complaining. She looked down on us, saying she was going to be the wife of the president. Everyone left Lisa stunned. Sean and I returned the gifts we had received and apologized to the departing guests. After everyone had left, my son muttered apologetically. Mom, I'm sorry. I wanted to reassure you, but instead, it ended up like this. Now we can't even work together anymore. That's why I told you not to worry about me. Also, about that matter, it's already settled. What? I said I couldn't trust a son who chooses a partner for their money, so I was going to fire you. But now that the marriage with Lisa is off, I'm not firing you. Sean looked relieved at my words. Thank you, Mom. I'll work even harder from now on. Your happiness is what matters most to me. I patted Sean on the back. Afterward, the engagement with Lisa was officially cancelled, and the cost of the ceremony was split. However, Lisa had planned to have Sean pay for the entire wedding and keep the gifts from her guests for herself. Unable to pay her credit card bills for the beauty treatments and other expenses, she ended up in debt. Lisa had already quit her job in anticipation of marriage and had no money. She quickly tried to marry again for money, but her new partner turned out to be a marriage scammer. She ended up even more in debt, and now no one knows where she is or what she's doing. On the other hand, our bond as mother and son strengthened even more after this incident. Sean seems to respect me even more now and is eager to become independent and reassure me. Not through marriage, but on his own. Thanks to his dedication to his work, the company has continued to grow. And just the other day, the president of a longtime business partner introduced his daughter to us. I have also worked with his daughter on several occasions. Sean seems quite interested in this new opportunity. My son has grown into a fine man, and it looks like a new spring is coming for him, which makes my heart leap with joy.
My name is Ashley, and I am a 32-year-old part-time housewife. Initially, I worked in customer service, but due to the impact of a new virus, I was targeted for staff reductions, and since then, I started working from home. I've always preferred working alone on tasks over customer service or public appearances, and enjoyed making accessories and stuffed animals by hand. However, these were just hobbies, and I had never considered showing or selling them to others. However, after a friend posted my creations on social media, a shop owner noticed them and started stocking my products. Eventually, through word of mouth, sales increased to the point where I could make a living. Unlike when these were just hobbies, there are challenges like accommodating customer requests and dealing with tight deadlines, but I find it much more fulfilling than the jobs I was not suited for. However, I am currently facing some family issues. It involves my husband John and my mother-in-law. John, who was an office worker, quit his job suddenly one day after my home business took off, without consulting me. Understandably, I asked him why he hadn't discussed it with me, to which he seriously replied, "Seeing you do what you love and shining made me envious. I want to live a life without regrets. It might be an inconvenience for a while, but I hope you understand." And pleaded. Faced with such words, I felt it was unfair to blame him alone. Indeed, when I was fired from my previous job and had no income, John, though grumbling, supported us financially. Now that my income is sufficient, we can manage even with John unemployed. Thinking it over, I told him, "Okay, take your time to find a job you're satisfied with," and encouraged him. After that, John started doing household chores, which he never did before. Thanks to this, my work progressed smoothly and I started receiving more orders, gradually increasing our income. Months passed, and a life where I worked from my room and John was a full-time homemaker became the norm, and I felt no discomfort or dissatisfaction. However, there is someone who cannot accept our situation. It was my mother-in-law. She believes that men should work outside and support the family, and women should support their husbands and take care of the home. While there's nothing wrong with that belief per se, she imposes it on us. Moreover, perhaps due to her generation, she doesn't understand the concept of remote work, and despite my explanations, she would say, "How is that different from being unemployed? It's just like playing at home. Quit that and take care of the household properly and have children." She didn't listen. Even explaining that we couldn't live without my income didn't change her view. She would only blame me, saying, "John was always smart and capable. He should find a better job soon. It's your duty as a wife to help him do that instead of keeping him locked up at home with a job like playing." Dealing with such remarks during unexpected visits and phone calls was wearing me down. Even when I spoke to John about it, he would only say, "She's from an older generation. Try to manage until I find a job," and never intervened. Although I have no complaints about our current life, the stress from my mother-in-law was building up and I feared it might explode one day. I wanted to resolve this before that happened. I started to feel anxious about the future. What is John thinking? Looking at him now, it doesn't seem like he's job hunting, and I wonder if this will continue forever. But if I rush him to find a job, might it break his pride and lead to a fight? I couldn't say anything, feeling guilty about my income and leaving the household chores to him. Then one day, John came to me and said he had found the job he wanted to do for the rest of his life. "I've finally found the job I want to do forever." John's eyes sparkled, a sight I hadn't seen in a long time, making me happy too, and I asked him what kind of job it was. He replied, "A web writer." In a surprising response, and me, ? floated. "A writer? Is it really that easy to become one?" John had been a salesman before, and I had never heard him mention being good at writing. I had heard on TV that it was a popular job among housewives lately, but unless one is a true professional, it takes a considerable time to make a living from it. "It's okay. It seems tough at first, but once the projects increase, I'll start earning quickly. It's cool, right? Working from home as a writer just like you." Despite my concerns, John was enthusiastic about his new job. "Did you choose that job just because it's cool?" John looked annoyed. "What's wrong with that? That's how you started too, because you liked it." That's true, but in contrast to my husband who was full of motivation, I felt uneasy looking at his expression. "What kind of writing are you going to do?" "Well, a bit of everything at first." His vague answer only increased my worries. "Oh, don't worry so much. I'll catch up to your income soon." He grinned, giving a thumbs up. Though I was inwardly dismayed, saying anything might provoke a response like, "Why are you acting so high and mighty?" So I remained silent. Although I was anxious, there was some truth to John's words. It might stabilize after some initial difficulties. I also started that way, so I shouldn't negate the job John had chosen. Perhaps John has a talent for this field that might truly flourish. Maybe one day he will write articles about my products. It might not be just a dream after all. With these hopeful thoughts amidst my worries, I decided to watch over John. But this decision turned out to be a big mistake. John, who started without any prior knowledge or research, struggled even with short writing tasks. He sat in front of the computer all day, constantly irritable. Naturally, he didn't do any housework at all. He just sat there incessantly scratching his head in frustration. Whenever I said anything, it would trigger him to lash out, and I found myself constantly watching his mood even during casual conversations. This situation forced me to take on all the household chores myself and inevitably interrupt my own work. Despite this, I tried to stay optimistic, telling myself that the beginning is always the hardest and that eventually he would settle into his new role and things would improve. So I refrained from voicing my complaints to him. Months passed, and although John's income initially was just a few $10, it gradually began to rise. However, it still wasn't enough to live on, but since he was making an effort, I praised him and did my best to encourage him. However, around that time, John's behavior started to change. He began frequently using industry jargon like,
"About that project,"
or
"that client, you know."
It was as if he was pretending to be a seasoned writer, often making condescending remarks. Still, I thought it was just a phase, where he was getting a bit carried away. So I internally rolled my eyes but let him be. This would have been endearing in itself, but it led to a grand misunderstanding by my mother-in-law, and her mistreatment of me escalated.
"See? John is so capable. He's able to achieve results in such a short period,"
she told me triumphantly. Indeed, he had started working, but it wasn't something to brag about like that. Yet, the next thing she said made me frown.
"While you're feeling good about doing nothing better than unemployed, John has quickly surpassed your income. You should quit your job now and start having children."
What? John surpassed my income? I was speechless, trying to comprehend her words, when she added,
"You can't even utter a word back. You should be grateful to have a husband like John who is so capable. Really, you have no spirit as a wife."
I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you mean. Has John's income surpassed mine? Did he say that?
"Yes, he's been crying about how hard the housework has been. If you can't appreciate John, then give him back to me."
Realizing what was going on, I thought it was better to talk to John than to argue back, so I gently ushered my mother-in-law out and waited for John to return. In the evening, after John returned from doing an interview for a cafe article, I brought up what my mother-in-law had said. "What have you been telling your mother? She seems to have the wrong idea." Seeing this, John looked evasive.
Maybe I communicated it badly?
At that moment, I was certain John was lying. You don't have to tell the whole truth, but it's honestly hard when I'm made out to be completely at fault. Your mother has never thought well of me. I need you to clear up this misunderstanding. John suddenly flared up, thinking he was being attacked.
Be quiet. A man has his pride. Can't you just play along with a lie a little?
Sorry. I was startled by his loud voice and ended up apologizing. But then John said,
I feel sick,
and left. When did John change like this? He wasn't such a troublesome person before. He had his childish moments, but he wasn't someone who threw tantrums like this. Could it be my fault? Was he upset that I let him do all the housework? Did my good income hurt him? But I can't just quit my job easily, and the situation won't change immediately. What should I do? I couldn't sleep at all, and John didn't come home that night. The next morning, I heard the front door open and thought it was John, but it was my mother-in-law instead.
Oh, have you been crying? Haven't slept?
You look awful. Seeing my face, she laughed through her nose.
Where's John?
I had assumed John was with her last night, so I was at a loss for words.
Can't you even respond properly?
As she plopped down on the sofa, John came back.
Mom, what are you doing here so early?
John looked startled to see her.
I thought you wouldn't be getting proper meals, so I came to make breakfast. I brought lots of side dishes, too,
she said, pulling out a bunch of containers from a paper bag.
By the way, John, where have you been so early in the morning?
John, looking a bit flustered, said,
Just a walk.
and looked at me for agreement. His evasiveness made my heart sink. Without my response, John exaggerated his joy at the gifts from his mother.
Honestly, a wife should wake up earlier than her husband and prepare breakfast. Sitting there with your puffy face in your pajamas, you make John look pitiful.
As she glanced sideways at me, she openly made snide remarks. Then John said,
That's right, tell her, Mom.
It was always just calming words from John when my mother-in-law wasn't around. But now, right in front of me, John joined her in attacking me, with an innocence I had never seen.
Calling that a job is not even on the same level as a man's work. You just don't get it.
Right? I should have opposed the marriage.
Mom, this is delicious. You're the best.
He loudly complimented the food, showing off while he ate, and my mother-in-law lounged on the sofa as if it were her own home. It was then that I truly felt miserable.
Hey, at least make some coffee. You're so inconsiderate.
At that moment, something inside me snapped. I grabbed my mother-in-law's arm and forcefully pushed her outside, locking the door and chaining it. She started yelling from outside.
Hey, what are you doing?
I stood in front of John, blocking the door. What was that all about? Both of you ganging up to harass me? What are you thinking? And where were you last night, John?
Be quiet. Just open the door.
No, I'm talking to you. I won't move until you answer me.
Be quiet.
Despite my resistance, John pushed me aside and opened the door.
What's wrong with you? A terrible woman. A demon wife.
Apologize to my mom.
Even as they both yelled at me, I clenched my mouth shut and did not speak.
Seriously, stop messing around and reflect on yourself.
After saying that, John left with his mother. As John passed by me, I faintly smelled soap. It's no use. As soon as I voiced it out, tears began to flow uncontrollably. It wasn't that John had changed. He had always been that person, and I just hadn't seen it. The good income I had was merely revealing his true nature. As for where John was last night, never underestimate a woman's intuition. I could guess what was going on. I didn't want to know, but maybe it was necessary to confront it. I wanted to lie down for a bit, but work was piling up. I washed away my tears with cool water and headed to my workshop. The next day, John and his mother appeared in front of me with nonchalant expressions. Then,
Have you reflected? Well, it doesn't matter. Last night, John and I decided I'm going to live here from today and stay with you.
what?
That means we're living together. It's for John's sake because it's pitiful like this. I should be here to supervise you, right? Right, John?
Yeah, you should learn from my mom. Like how to be a good wife.
They both looked at me, but continued the conversation as if I wasn't there. Are you saying you're moving in here?
That's what I'm saying, aren't I? You really do lack understanding. Look, you've been getting too comfortable with your measly $500 a month while using John like a servant, right? You can stay here because John's monthly income is $10,000. You should be grateful for that.
Looking at John's face, I could tell he was aware he was lying, as he wouldn't meet my eyes. But feeling supported, he smirked beside his mother. Seeing that, I knew I could no longer stay with him. I understand. I'll divorce John. Please live happily with John, who earns $500 a month. As I said that, my mother-in-law started laughing at me.
What? Are you making excuses for losing? Oh, please, if you want a divorce, be my guest. I couldn't ask for more. Please leave.
John's eyes began to dart around, which my mother-in-law didn't notice. Understood. John, I will contact you later regarding the procedures. I said that and packed only a few clothes and necessary work tools into my suitcase. I will contact you later.
Wait.
John hurried after me, but as his mother clung to his arm saying,
John, there's no need to stop her,
I quickly left the house. It didn't take long for my mother-in-law to realize all the facts. I promptly arranged for a lawyer and a moving company and canceled the apartment lease. As movers began taking things out early in the morning, the frantic calls from John and his mother started coming in.
What is this? What are you doing?
She shrieked over the phone, but I remained calm. Didn't you say to go ahead with the divorce? I'm just taking my things. The apartment is already canceled, so please move out by the end of the month.
What? Why?
Why? Because the apartment was leased under my name. I paid the initial costs, and I've been paying the rent. I'll leave the furniture and appliances we bought when we first got married. The phone was handed to John.
Hey, you can't just do whatever you want. I supported you when you were unemployed.
That's true, but it was only for a few months, wasn't it? I supported you financially much more than that. I even turned a blind eye when you used my card for expenses and such.
But this is sudden. It's tyrannical. Pay me compensation.
Yes, pay us compensation.
John was ranting beside his mother, but thanks to the mental rehearsals I had done over the past few days, I responded smoothly. Compensation? You thought I hadn't noticed? I was aware of your affair. I have evidence. After my words, there was a moment of silence from John, and then my mother-in-law took over the phone.
You, blaming your lack of charm as a woman. An affair is just a man being a man. That's no grounds for compensation. It's no excuse for divorce.
Mother-in-law, do you remember you've constantly berated my work tools as mere toys and broke them? Not just once or twice, remember? I have photos of the broken tools, receipts from when I purchased them, and emails detailing the delays caused by your actions, all submitted to my lawyer. Are you still calling that an excuse? Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law shrieked.
Show your face. Come here right now.
You'll hear from my lawyer soon, and we can discuss everything then. I look forward to it. I hung up after that. When the meeting eventually took place, the two who had been so bold in cursing me had lost all their bluster. John seemed to finally understand the situation he was in. Likewise, his mother, after realizing the reality of her capable son, kept her head down. As the lawyer methodically stated the facts of John's affair and the conditions for the divorce, John suddenly burst into tears at the table.
Forgive me. I was just jealous. You are more than me and you do what you love for a living. I couldn't tell my mom and I took advantage of your kindness. I just wanted to show off a little.
Exactly. John did nothing wrong. You understand, right? Men have their pride. Please reconsider the divorce. While John's mother dramatically cried into her handkerchief, it was clear she was just trying to garner sympathy. I knew all about how John had been splurging with my credit card, how he had tried to buy a luxury car under my name but couldn't because he wasn't present at the signing, and how he had bought luxury goods and jewelry for his affair partner. After all that, hearing about a man's pride almost made me laugh. Mother-in-law, you said that because I lack charm as a woman, it's understandable that John would cheat on me, right? You even said that divorce was what I wanted. What are you trying to stop the divorce from a charmless, incompetent wife like me? Did I say that? Maybe it was just a slip of the tongue. I don't remember.
She stumbled over her words, avoiding eye contact with me. It's about money, isn't it? You're panicking because if John and I divorce, you'll have trouble getting by. You know the allowance you've been getting comes from my income, right? You just don't want to lose that, do you?
I just wanted you to come back.
It's too late for such meek excuses. I can't forget what you've said and done to me and go back to supporting you and your son's lives like before. An apology from you and John isn't enough for me to forgive everything. For the first time in the conversation, my mother-in-law looked up and made eye contact with me. As I stared back at her directly, she grimaced with frustration and looked down again.
Come on, think it over. I'll find a real job, okay? Isn't that enough? You're busy with work too, so isn't it better for us to be together for safety?
As John looked up at me pleadingly, I realized I felt nothing for him anymore. We're past that stage. I'm honestly very disappointed, but I can't live with you anymore. I do have many things to reflect on myself, but from now on, please live happily with your beloved mother. I'm truly hoping for that now.
This can't be happening.
As I glanced at my mother-in-law, she was glaring at me over her handkerchief, looking demonic. Mother-in-law, you must be pleased. Not only did you manage to drive out a daughter-in-law you disliked, but your beloved son has returned to you. Truly, your wishes have come true. I hope you find a daughter-in-law who suits your desires one day. I wish you happiness with your son, who pretends to be an industry insider on an income of $500 a month. Now you can cook delicious meals for him every day. You must be very happy. As I said this with a smile, I thought I heard her mutter,
"This demon!"
but I pretended not to hear and continued with the proceedings. Thus, my divorce from John was finalized smoothly. My ex-husband ended up selling the furniture and appliances I left behind and moved back in with his mother. Due to the lack of income, their relationship became strained, leading to a tense living situation. I hope he seriously commits to his work and makes a living. Now that he's a stranger, I only wish he gets serious when pushed into a corner. Thanks to shedding this great burden, my work flourished even more. Recently, I've received more orders from various places, and I've even been able to hire an assistant and start a company. However, when our company's website and social media managed by my staff began receiving derogatory comments about my products and me, it became a small scandal. It quickly became apparent that the source of all these messages was my former mother-in-law. I considered suing her after consulting a lawyer, but decided just to issue a warning, considering the mental toll of further involvement with her. I hope that's the end of it, but if something like this happens again, I won't hold back. My former mother-in-law probably blames me for the situation she's in. The thought sends shivers down my spine, but she's no longer my concern. Now I am spending my days fulfilled alongside my colleagues.
Welcome, my little slave. Despite knowing that I was here to formally introduce myself for marriage, this was the first thing she said. What? I thought I must have heard wrong and let out a confused voice. The mother-in-law giggled as she looked at me. Oh, weren't you a slave after all? With such a poor-looking face. And David, whom I thought was on my side, betrayed me terribly. Glancing at my face, David burst out laughing. It looks poor, right? I'd love to see what your parents look like. That's right. Well, coming to a wealthy family like ours, I wonder if your parents would faint. The mother-in-law and David continued to look down on me. I couldn't stand being looked down upon even by my parents. While they weren't looking, I secretly sent a message to my father. He replied immediately. I'm on my way there right now. I'm going to get some fresh air outside. I couldn't bear to hear any more insults from David and his family. Don't you run away now. David's vulgar laughter echoed. I left the seat too and waited for my father to arrive. 10 minutes later. I brought my father to meet David and the others. I am the father of the slave. My father spoke calmly, but his eyes were not smiling at all. What? The mother-in-law, who should know my father's face, stiffened her face greatly. I am Kelly Smith. I turned 30 this year. I work as an office worker at a small company called Foster Machinery, and I have lived as inconspicuously as possible. That's why I only wear foundation for my usual makeup. I prefer to wear navy or black clothing. I don't wear contacts, and my glasses are thick and have a high prescription. The reason I go to such lengths is that my father has a high-profile job, and I have been influenced by it since I was young. My father is an actor. He used to be popular, and apparently, he was surrounded by women when he walked down the street. He often appears on TV in supporting roles and is moderately well known. I had a tough time because of my father until middle school. Classmates would ask for my father's autograph, and their parents would say, "Let us meet him." I refused all those requests, and as a result, I was often criticized by others. I was probably thought to be unfairly privileged. I was also harassed by envious classmates. I didn't want to cause any trouble for my beloved father. I hated the thought of being seen as arrogant. After much thought, I made a thorough effort to dress plainly and went to a high school where I knew no one. Fortunately, Smith is a common surname, so I was able to live normally from high school. And perhaps because I look plain, men don't approach me. That allowed me to have a comfortable student life. I loved talking about manga with my female friends, and those were probably the happiest times. I met my fiancé David after becoming a working adult. David works for the leasing company that provides copiers to the company I work for. David and I had little direct interaction. David would come regularly to check on the copier, and we would exchange a few words then. Our relationship changed dramatically when the copier broke down one day. That day, I was busy preparing materials for a meeting to be held the next morning. However, the copier stopped working in the middle of this. I was greatly troubled. If this continued, I wouldn't be able to prepare the materials for tomorrow's meeting. So I hurriedly called David. David came quickly and checked the copier. "Can you fix it?" When I asked David anxiously, he responded with a smile. "No worries. I'll take care of it." I fell in love with David's smile in an instant. The rest is history. In the end, the copier wasn't fixed, but David arranged for a replacement. The materials were prepared in time for the meeting. I, who had fallen in love with David, made every effort to appeal to him. I asked for his contact information and called him frequently. Then I confessed to David, and we started dating. David was always very kind even after we started dating. He was always considerate, and I had never seen him angry. I thought that even if he knew my father's real identity, he would still treat me kindly. With that in mind, after dating for 3 months, I bravely proposed to David. He accepted joyfully. I remember being very happy. However, there was one thing that concerned me. It was about my appearance. I had always worn thick glasses. I always dressed plainly, even on dates. It was a long-standing habit. Actually, I looked just like my father. I have distinct facial features. Because of my appearance, I was envied by girls in middle school. Boys also judged me by my looks, and I had some tough times. But with David, I was sure it would be okay. From now on, I thought, I would gradually change my appearance for David's sake. That's what I thought. However, after getting engaged to David, I started to feel some discomfort. Before getting engaged, David seemed like a kind person, but recently he has started making remarks that look down on me. The other day, we went to a bridal fair to decide on a wedding venue because David had suggested it. The place David took me to was a dazzling world. It was a luxurious guest house, perfect for a large-scale wedding with over 100 guests. Seeing that scene, I was perplexed. I don't have many friends from my school days. Plus, I didn't want to stand out, so I had hoped for a small venue with only a ceremony. I really wanted to go home right away. However, David was having fun and I couldn't bring it up. So, I endured and passed the time. After it was over, we stopped at a cafe. David was in a very good mood. That wedding venue we just saw was nice, wasn't it? I would prefer an even flashier ceremony though. While drinking coffee, David spoke. If things continued this way, we would end up choosing that wedding venue. In a panic, I decided to discuss my preference with David. I think a wedding with just the two of us might be nice. I don't like standing out too much. I had thought the kind David would surely compromise. However, the reality was completely different. David looked at me and snickered. Indeed, a plain Jane like Kelly wouldn't suit a wedding like the one we just saw. Is there even a dress that would suit those thick glasses of yours? What? I was bewildered by David's comment. But a wedding is a matter between families, right? My family is wealthy. We need to have a decent wedding to maintain our dignity. I was speechless. The previously kind David had started looking down on me as if he had changed. I was terribly shocked by David's attitude. And to my bewildered self, David made an even worse comment. Kelly should just stay quiet and do as I say. You should be grateful to even get married, being such a plain Jane. Suddenly, David's face turned serious, and he made that comment. I was bewildered by his words. I even felt scared by David's serious expression. Then, the next moment, David smiled and said, I'll decide everything for you. Kelly, you just need to say yes and do as I tell you. Yes. I didn't know how to respond and laughed awkwardly. Maybe getting engaged to David was a mistake. But it's too late to pretend it never happened. I have already reported our engagement to the company and our parents. Moreover, I still liked David even after all that had been done to me. He might return to the kind David I knew before the engagement. That's why, despite being puzzled by David's change, I had no choice but to continue with the engagement. David kept making remarks that troubled me. Each time, my heart was hurt. But I couldn't come to dislike David. Even though I thought about breaking up with him, the kind David I knew kept flashing in my mind. I still loved David. I continued the engagement relationship while being puzzled by David's change. Then one day, something happened that made me even more bewildered. It was the day David and I went to the wedding venue to handle the paperwork. After visiting several wedding venues, David decided on the first luxurious guest house we saw. Eagerly, David said, "After all, a grand ceremony suits me. Of course, it's mismatched for Kelly." David laughed heartily, hurting me. And so, for the paperwork, David and I went to that guest house. On the way there, I encountered a person. "Isn't that David?" "Mom? What are you doing here?" David was surprised and looked at the woman. Then, David introduced her to me. "Kelly, this is my mom. Mom, this is Kelly Smith, my fiancée. Remember I told you I was getting married?" The mother-in-law smiled and greeted me. "I'm David's mother. You seem like a serious young lady. Where do you work? Surely it must be at a major company?" It was my first meeting with David's mother. I answered nervously. "I work in administration at Foster Machinery." Then, the mother-in-law looked puzzled. "Foster Machinery? I haven't heard of it." Then, David joined in our conversation. Foster Machinery is one of my sales destinations. It's a small company with about 30 employees, so it's natural you don't know it, Mom. Upon hearing David's explanation, the mother-in-law frowned. "I thought since you were David's fiancée, you'd work at a more reputable company. Isn't the salary there rather low? Are you planning to make David suffer?" "I'm sorry. Indeed, the salary at my current company isn't very high." So all I could do was apologize to the mother-in-law. Then, the mother-in-law sighed heavily and said, "Anyway, can you stop relying on David like a child? We come from a distinguished lineage. We don't need a woman from an unknown background." "Ah." I responded to the mother-in-law's comment with a bewildered reply, but the mother-in-law continued to heat up. "First of all, what about your parents? They work at a decent company, right?" The mother-in-law glared at me and interrogated me. "Well, my father is." As I tried to answer the mother-in-law's question with confusion, my eyes were drawn to her bag because there was something familiar in it. Seeing me silent, David spoke up. "Mom, calm down a bit. We'll go and formally introduce Kelly for marriage soon." "I see. I won't be very welcoming though." The mother-in-law looked at me with a displeased face, and it seemed my first impression was the worst for her. The path to marriage seemed too difficult, and I secretly sighed. Then came the day of the formal marriage introduction. Wow! In front of David's family home, I muttered in surprise. The scene before me far exceeded my expectations. Since the mother-in-law had mentioned they were from a distinguished family lineage, I had expected David's home to be wealthy. However, the scene before me was more amazing than I expected. The gate was automatic, and there was an elevator inside. Additionally, there were 10 luxury cars outside. They were all foreign cars, probably a hobby of the father-in-law. David started talking to me. "My dad isn't here today because of work. It's just Mom, so just relax as usual." David said this with a smile, but my face tightened even more. The mother-in-law had been harsh to me before. Surely she would make some snide remark today too. Then, David and I entered the living room where the mother-in-law was waiting. "Hello. About the other day." I said that to the mother-in-law. Then, the next moment, she said something outrageous. "Welcome, my little slave." Even though she should have known I was here for a marriage introduction, this was the first thing she said. "What?" I thought I must have misheard and let out a confused voice. The mother-in-law chuckled as she looked at me. "Oh. Weren't you a slave? You have such a poor-looking face. I just wanted someone I could use for free." A slave. How could she say such a terrible thing? Then the mother-in-law laughed as if she was having fun. "David told me. He said it's okay to treat you like a slave. It seems like David just wanted to marry someone who would obey him completely. Sorry for you. David, what do you mean? I asked David, turning pale. It must be a poor joke. I wanted to believe that. And David, whom I thought was on my side, betrayed me terribly. Glancing at my face, David burst out laughing. Poor face, right? I'd love to see what your parents look like. They probably have plain faces too. Maybe we could use them as well, right? David said this and laughed loudly. Indeed, having someone obedient for free is appealing. But coming to a wealthy family like ours, I wonder if your parents would faint. The mother-in-law and David continued to look down on me. Then, the mother-in-law asked with a smirk. By the way, what does your father do? He's not homeless, is he? Such a thing. Then David burst out laughing and replied to the mother-in-law. Mom, that's not a job. It's obvious from Kelly that he doesn't have a stable job. Ah, I'm laughing so much it hurts. David and the mother-in-law continued to look down on my parents. They assumed they had low education and plain looks. Frustrated, I clenched my teeth and listened to their remarks. The mother-in-law and David were too disrespectful. I couldn't stand being looked down upon even by my parents. While they weren't looking, I quietly sent a message to my father. I need you here right now. I sent this message along with a map of David's family home that David had sent me for today's marriage introduction. I knew my father had the day off from work today. He was probably relaxing at home by now. Fortunately, my father replied within a minute. I'm on my way. Relieved by my father's response, I spoke to David and the mother-in-law. I'm feeling unwell, so I'm going to get some fresh air outside. I couldn't bear to hear any more insults from David and his family. I thought I would wait quietly outside until my father arrived. Oh really? Then David, let's relax and continue our coffee. The mother-in-law was pleased to be alone with David. Kelly, don't you dare run away. David's vulgar laughter echoed. I left the room and waited outside for my father's arrival. 10 minutes later. My father, wearing dark sunglasses, appeared. Kelly, what's going on? You were supposed to be introducing your fiancé's family today, right? I was surprised when you suddenly called. My father asked me with a puzzled face. Dad. I'm just so frustrated. Seeing my father's face, I felt relieved and started to cry. I tried to hold back, but the tears kept coming. What's wrong, Kelly? Seeing me cry, my father began to panic. I explained everything that had happened to my father. Since getting engaged, David's attitude had changed. I also told him about how the mother-in-law had joined David in looking down on me. I can't forgive them for looking down on you without knowing anything. Even as I explained, my tears didn't stop. My father listened to me in silence. However, it seemed like he was quietly angry. Then I told my father something about the mother-in-law. At that moment, my father smirked. He took off his sunglasses and handed them to me. We're going inside now. I'll make sure they regret hurting Kelly. I made a decision at my father's words. My love for David had cooled. All that was left was a desire for revenge. I've made up my mind too. We'll make David and the others regret this. After doing something, I put on my father's sunglasses. Then, together with my father, I entered David's family home. I stood before David and the others, leading my father. Sorry to keep you waiting. Standing resolute with my father, I, wearing sunglasses, left David speechless. Why are you suddenly wearing sunglasses? He muttered while looking at me. The mother-in-law initially smirked at me, but upon seeing my father next to me, she was stunned. I realized how people can freeze in shock. The mother-in-law must have been planning to say something awful again when I returned. But too bad. I won't let things go her way. Instead, I plan to push her into the abyss. She must already know who my father is. Then my father spoke to the mother-in-law. I am the father of the slave. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not smiling. His handsome face only added to his sternness. What? The mother-in-law, who likely knew my father's face, dramatically stiffened her expression. Why? Why is Mr. John Smith here? No, could this be some kind of prank? While shaking, the mother-in-law spoke. Her cheeks were a bit red. There seemed to be an excited atmosphere around her. And her eyes sparkled like those of a young girl. David, not understanding well, remained dumbfounded. My father did not answer her questions and just stared sternly at David and the mother-in-law. The mother-in-law, making eye contact with my father, blushed. It was unbecoming of a woman her age. I watched the mother-in-law with cold eyes. Then, a bewildered David finally asked. Mr. John Smith? Do you know him, Mom? This person. David probably doesn't know about my father. I think he's quite well known among the mother's generation. But younger people might not know unless they watch dramas. Then the mother-in-law glared sharply at David. David. What an impolite thing to say. This gentleman is Mr. John Smith. A great actor and my first love. What? David seemed incredulous. Then the mother-in-law turned towards my father with a smile and spoke. I'm a huge fan of you. Look, this too. She hurriedly grabbed her bag and showed it to my father. It's a keychain available only to fan club members. I've been a fan of you for 20 years. The mother-in-law began to assert her status as a huge fan of my father. Mom. David was somewhat disgusted by the mother-in-law's sudden change. The mother-in-law continued to talk to my father. She must have been very excited to have her favorite actor in front of her. However, my father's gaze on the mother-in-law was very stern. And after being silent until then, my father finally spoke. I understand that you're a fan of mine. However, you tried to treat my beloved daughter Kelly like a slave, didn't you? What? The mother-in-law's high spirits suddenly turned to dismay. She froze, visibly trembling. Ignoring the mother-in-law, my father continued. And you dared to treat me as a homeless person without even meeting me? That's quite disrespectful. Saying that, my father glared at the mother-in-law. Then she began to panic. No. I didn't know that Miss Kelly's father was Mr. John Smith. I'd be thrilled to have you as a family. Right, David? Yeah. David seemed to be pushed by the mother-in-law. And the mother-in-law tried to justify herself to my father. I was disgusted listening to her. Until my father arrived, the mother-in-law had been looking down on both me and my father. Seeing my father, she changed so quickly. I only felt distrust. If I look closely, Kelly does resemble you, such a wonderful lady. The earlier comments were just because I was jealous of losing my son. If I had known about you, I would have treated you more respectfully. The mother-in-law continued to desperately pretend. My father looked at her with annoyance. Watching their exchange, I thought to myself, I can't keep troubling my father like this. Besides, this is my issue. I should clearly express this to the mother-in-law myself. So I told her. I am breaking off my engagement with David. There will never be any family ties between my father and your family. No. Kelly, it was my fault. You're missing the chance to become family with Mr. John Smith. Please reconsider. The mother-in-law, with a tearful face, tried to persuade me. She had been terrible to me up until now. Even her tearful face couldn't be trusted. I looked at her with cold eyes. However, seeing me silent, the mother-in-law thought she could persuade me. She smiled sweetly at me. You want to marry David, don't you? I won't oppose it anymore, it's okay. I will do anything you say for your sake. The mother-in-law, desperate to become family with my father, clung to me. Her readiness to do anything was the complete opposite of her initial stance. I even despised how quickly the mother-in-law changed her opinions. I muttered softly. No, I don't want to. Excuse me? What did you say? Not sure if she had heard me, the mother-in-law tilted her head. So I shouted louder this time. I absolutely do not want to become family with you. What? The mother-in-law was baffled by my shout. I poured out my feelings to her. As soon as you heard where I work, you made derogatory comments, right? And you spoke terribly about my father. I will never forgive that. I firmly told the mother-in-law. What? Thinking it futile to persuade me further, the mother-in-law looked at my father. Then, smiling, she spoke to him. Kelly says this, but you want your daughter to be happy, right? Our family has a lot of money, and surely she will be happy with us. Certainly, some people might think money equals happiness. However, I am different. Perhaps understanding my feelings, my father countered her words. Kelly values love more than money. Besides, we have money. I make a decent amount from acting. The mother-in-law was at a loss for words. It's understandable. After all, my father is a well-known actor who appears frequently on dramas. He earns a lot and isn't short on money. Coming from a wealthy home, there are no benefits for me to marry just for money. The mother-in-law realized this and fell silent. She probably couldn't think of a good way out. Watching the silent mother-in-law, my father continued. You say you are a fan of mine, but I detest people who disparage my dear daughter. Could you please stop calling yourself a fan? With that, my father glared at the mother-in-law. Then, tears started to roll down the mother-in-law's cheeks. If you hate me, I can't go on living. The mother-in-law said this, breaking down in tears. David, who had been silent until now, started to speak. If you stay quiet, you can say whatever you want, huh? Kelly, you'll regret breaking off our engagement. No one else will bother with a plain Jane like you. David smirked as he spoke. David, stop it. In front of my father, the mother-in-law tried to stop David. But David didn't hold back. I chose a plain Jane like you because I thought you'd obey me. I was planning to cheat with cute girls once we were married. This really pisses me off. David rambled on about things I didn't even ask to hear. Listening to David's words, I thought calmly. There was never any love from David. He just wanted a marriage with a woman who would obey him. My affection for David had long since cooled. As I was thinking about this, David continued his selfish remarks. You. My father gritted his teeth, looking like he was about to grab David. It seemed like a good time for me to fight back. Dad, wait. So I stopped my father. I remained wearing my sunglasses, and I let out a slight smile. What now? David seemed taken aback by my confident smile. Do I still look plain? I swiftly took off the sunglasses I had been wearing. What? David stared at my face, frozen in place. It made sense. With the sunglasses off, I was fully made up. Normally, I only wore foundation. But now, I had done my eyeshadow, mascara, and eyeliner. After meeting my father and crying, I had quickly done my makeup. Just eye makeup, but I think it really changed my appearance. Is that really you, Kelly? David's face turns a bit red. He must be mesmerized by how the makeup enhances my features. Yes, it's definitely me. Until now, I didn't want to stand out, so I intentionally made myself look plain. But I've decided to stop hiding myself. Until now, it was because of my father that I unintentionally stood out. That's why I wanted to remain inconspicuous. However, because of that, both David and the mother-in-law spoke ill of my father. If they're going to badmouth my father, I might as well stand out a bit and be myself. That's what I thought. David, with a flushed face, says, If you had been like this from the start, I would have been nicer to you. I would reconsider everything with you if you looked like this with makeup. Let's cancel the engagement breakup right now. And while you're at it, introduce me to some beautiful actresses through your father. Who would cancel the engagement now? And asking for actresses is too presumptuous. I firmly told David. The engagement is off for good. I don't need you, David. I'll also cancel the wedding venue. What? David is stunned. However, I'm not going to let him off that easily. I press him further. Of course, you'll be responsible for the cancellation fee for the wedding venue. That's only fair, right? The mother-in-law cries out in confusion. Wait a minute. It's too much to ask him to pay the whole amount. David also looks bewildered and is unable to argue. Then, my father chimes in. Why not have David's father pay for it? With all those luxury cars he owns, it should be easy for him. My father says this with a pleasant smile. Here, I play my strongest card. If you're not satisfied, we can take this to court? But remember, my father is a famous actor. If the news gets out about this, he might be attacked by his extreme fans. My father has many fervent fans. A critic who once called my father a poor actor faced terrible consequences. Harassing phone calls and letters with knives in them, the extent of the harassment was unimaginable. It was even in the news for a while. Remembering that incident, the mother-in-law's face turns pale. She frantically tries to persuade David. David, you should bear the entire cancellation fee. You don't know what might happen. From the look on the mother-in-law's face, it seems David understands the gravity of the situation. Huh? No way. David's face turns desperate, and he collapses to his knees. I don't need David in my life. Dad, let's go home. I ignore David and the mother-in-law, who are slumped down, and leave with my father. My engagement with David is conclusively broken off. And David ends up being responsible for the full amount of the cancellation fee for the wedding venue. In fact, David's father is the CEO of a major corporation, and my father once appeared in commercials for his company. Because of that connection, my father informed David's father about David and the mother-in-law's behavior. Naturally, David's father was furious. He severely reprimanded David and the mother-in-law. Then, he pressured David to take on the full amount of the cancellation fee. As a result, David had to shoulder millions. The fallout affected the mother-in-law as well. This time, she was faced with divorce from David's father. It wasn't just because of how they treated us. Apparently, the mother-in-law was notorious for her lavish spending. She had spent a significant amount following my father, a famous actor. That funding came from David's father's money. David's father had apparently run out of patience with her. Additionally, my father revealed that the mother-in-law had sent him quite risky love letters. I want to divorce and be with Mr. John Smith. My current partner is just a source of money. She had written such content in love letters to my father. David's father was furious about this. Despite the mother-in-law's resistance, they proceeded to divorce through lawyers. The mother-in-law lamented. This isn't how it was supposed to be. And lived in tears, I heard through the grapevine. She was also forced to leave my father's fan club. Her troublesome stalking behavior was too much to handle. It's hard to imagine happiness visiting the mother-in-law now. She brought it upon herself. Half a year has passed. And then, David was arrested. The reason was his stalking behavior towards me. He couldn't forget me after I took off my sunglasses that day. David started appearing frequently in front of me. Even after I quit my job, he would wait outside my house. He also called often. Please, agree to get engaged again. I can't manage without you. David pleaded over the phone, crying, but in the end, he was only looking at my face. It was very different before and after I showed my makeup. I don't need a man who judges only by looks. I politely refused and blocked his calls. However, David's behavior only escalated. I consulted the police several times. At times, I felt threatened by him. After much deliberation, I filed a complaint with the police. My father supported this decision. Eventually, David was arrested for forcibly entering my house. And with his arrest, he was apparently fired from his job. Now, all that's left for David is several tens of thousands in debt. It's unlikely that David will be able to lead a decent life from now on. That's the punishment for looking down on people. What goes around, comes around. Since then, I've been working as my father's manager. This job is different from my previous office work, it's more challenging. I manage my father's schedule and accompany him to venues to make greetings. I even handle salary negotiations. Previously, as an office worker, I mostly commuted between home and the office. I rarely spoke to people at work and spent most of my time facing a computer. Now, meeting and talking to people has become a main part of my job, a big change from before. Yet, I find this new role incredibly enjoyable. Being a manager is a glamorous job, but it's more than that. It's a behind-the-scenes job that allows my father to focus on acting. The hours are irregular, and it requires adaptability. More than anything, it's a job that allows me to support my father up close. After causing so much worry in the past, I want to properly repay him. It's a job I've just started. Many challenges will likely arise. But I want to persevere and keep looking forward. I continue to work hard every day by my beloved father's side.